Welcome to another High Ground podcast. I'm CVW,
Callum?
and today we are looking at 80s horror films it's October. And what better way to start than what I define as the golden era of it?
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially for the slasher.
Yeah.
78 to 87 is the rough
I go to just
academic era for it.
I think it right until it bled into the early 90s for me, because I know it went straight to DVD to video.
Yeah.
But to me, it's the rise of the video store culture from the like you were saying, 78 with Halloween, and that was the big boom. But you'd go into video shops and that's what you'd see as soon as you walked through the door.
Well, the Video Nasties was in full swing in the UK, wasn't it, as well? Was it 81 onwards ish?
Forbidden films.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the idea of like half the films on my shelf would have got me in jail.
Yeah.
And it's quite weird to think that when you watch these films now, they're so tame compared to what that is out now, and like, you can clearly, obviously tell that although the practical effects are really good, that they're fake.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a strange thing to think that these were morally corrupting people.
It's because the effects technology, or even though they were practical, had moved on so far. From the likes of Tom Savini.
Oh God, yeah.
So
Rob Bottin and people like that.
And they were actually creating, more realistic with the gore, and they'd have all the blood and everything, and you got the psychological of the and then, but so it's like blame all of the world's problems on videos, because now these films were able to go into your house, whereas before you'd have to go and see them in the cinema or wait to be on TV. It's the fact that
you can rewind your favourite moments.
So you could literally dwell on the bits where there's blood freeing from
or boobies.
And then you've got the the amount of times people would rewind the likes of I know it's not horror, but Basic Instinct,
or something like Porky's, or
Trading Places, where Jamie Lee Curtis gets her hoo-hoos out. And it's stuff like that. It was able to bring this sort of things into the house, and then you can guarantee that the kids weren't going to get hold of them. And the whole Video Nasty thing, I remember discussing the likes of Evil Dead, which you can get. You can get the second one, but you can never get the first one.
Yeah, it's very strange.
But
or the Exorcist, which you couldn't actually. I don't think you could actually buy.
Can't get it at all.
Till like 2000 or something like that. I remember that there was trailers on telly for the version you've never seen, and no one had ever seen it anyway. If you hadn't seen it originally. I mean, I remember my mum telling me she snuck in at 14 to see that cinema. And
pirate videos always did the round though. That's the thing.
They did.
It wasn't as grand a scale as they have now. We could literally flick onto the internet.
Yeah, I mean, the internet then would have loved it, wouldn't it? They'd have loved the internet in the Video Nasties era, wouldn't they?
Actually, I'm so glad that we didn't have the internet. I preferred the whole old school.
Going in clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that you had to wait for these films, and the fact you could go to video stores rather than finding. Sorry about that.
Bless you.
Thank you. One thing I really truly miss is going to video stores, and actually you have the horror section when you're like 12 years old or 10 years old, and then you'd be looking at all these big drawn posters, pictures on video covers, rather than now being able to go onto the internet and find the film you want, the X-rated cut, or
ready to stream right away. And the posters are absolute crap now on films. They're just photoshopped. Whereas, like you say about the videos, was you could walk in, look at the front of a video case, and be like, "Wow, that looks amazing," and then probably get home and there's like the front cover didn't happen. It's your imagination did the rest.
Things like these are films that I haven't seen in years. Swamp Thing, the drawn cover. Then I've never seen a Troma film yet. I'm sorry, I'm not a horror fan.
I've only seen one.
I bet there's a load.
It's the famous one, the Toxic Avenger.
They're all on Amazon Prime, and they're literally on my watch list now because I found them the other day. And Welcome to Tromaville, the documentary.
And Juliet as well.
Yeah, I've got that on my watch list now. It's literally
Class of Nukem High.
Yeah, I think that would be on there because they're all on Amazon Prime at the moment, and I'm literally looking at them going, I want to see this and this, because I just want to. Like I said, I don't do horror, but Lloyd Kaufman. If it wasn't for the likes of him or James Gunn got his start with him.
Roger Corman as well.
Roger Corman, who were like Stallone with Death Days 2000. Was it David Carradine as well?
Yeah.
Ron Howard got his start with as a director with Roger Corman. That's why he's in Apollo 13. And of course, if you look at Lloyd Kaufman, who's in Guardians of the Galaxy, so you've got all these people from the 70s and 80s, these horror maestros and producers, who gave the new generation and the new breed, even like classic Hollywood now. I mean, with Ron Howard, they got their start as directors on doing these films.
Yeah, Jack Nicholson started his career with Roger Corman.
That was Little Shop of Horrors, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's also in one of the Poe films with Vincent Price. I can't remember now, but and of course Roger Corman also has a cameo in Silence of the Lambs as the FBI director. Oh. So does George Romero. So Jonathan Demme was sort of playing with that whole. These are the previous masters of horror. Let's have them in this new.
They did that with Jason X as well.
Yeah, David Cronenberg. Yeah, at the beginning, isn't he? Yeah, he's another pioneer of 80s horror where they changed it from. Like it's still disgusting, but it's the body horror aspect of everything.
The Fly.
Yeah.
I saw The Fly too.
The Fly's awful.
At the cinema, I'm sure.
Good, but I mean awful to watch. Just.
Should I be admitting all these sort of things? Because at the end of the day, cinemas were good back in the day. You didn't need all you had to do was be perseverant, and they'd let you in.
Yeah.
They would, but nowadays
there wasn't
so
any
much
real
rules.
Certification thing.
I actually in the mid-90s got turned down for a 15 certificate. I was about
20. What was that for?
Nightmare 6.
Oh, was that
7?
15?
7. The Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Oh, New Nightmare. I thought that was 18,
I went all the way through to Leicester to watch it.
Yeah.
And they asked me for my ID. I had my student ID, my university ID on me at the time. So there you are. Oh, we're sorry. Yeah, I was able to get in to see all the other ones without any hassle.
Yeah, if you're in university, surely you're not 15 as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. When I saw my university ID, they were like, "Oh, we're sorry." But I'm not knocking it. I was ID'd on the eve of my 35th as well for alcohol, so I'm not complaining. I'm not. But back in the 80s, if you were perseverant enough, the cinemas would just turn a blind eye because at the end
money
of the day, yeah. And bearing in mind they had 2 screens and the likes, so thank you thank you to all the people who let me into the cinemas. If you're actually listening to any stuff like this, but it was we couldn't consume as much in the 80s, especially in terms of horror, because it was forbidden. It was like when you're young, under 15 or under 18, but because it was like forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
You wanted to see it, and I didn't get into horror till about 88. I had a period from about 88 to 92, 93 where I loved horror movies, and I loved the genre, and completely. So, but it wasn't like now where you could literally come home from school and just go on the internet and spend your entire evening in a little bubble.
Have it all to your fingertips.
Yeah, you had to literally go out and rent the film, or
find some circumvent way to get around the regulations. Yeah, I know a lot of the directors and people to do with that era on a lot of the documentaries, they always say, like now is no fun because you can just click it and it appears on your screen, whereas like back then you had to work to find what you wanted to watch, if it was frowned upon.
Yeah, we literally copies of The Exorcist would do the round. If someone had a copy, they'd literally be
like 7th generation before you got one.
People would always they did it. There was more of an innocence to it, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because these films were just. It's not. I don't like the way the horrors went after the horror is now, in the sense that gore for the sake of gore.
Yeah, I don't like. Yeah, that's Saw we have to thank for that.
Yeah, but back in the 80s, it was. I mean, it was so much more. You wouldn't have a person couldn't sit in his room. There's an introvert, which a lot of the geekier culture are. You wouldn't sit in your room all day watching. If you're predisposed to like horror, you wouldn't sit in your whole room all day watching gore after gore after gore after gore.
Yeah.
Or horror, and especially the way it is now. You'd literally you'd have to go out, get the video, go home, watch the video. You take the video back, and you take another one. It's because of the way piracy has gone. I know there was piracy in the 80s. We've already discussed that with the tapes being doing around.
Yeah.
But now you can just sit at home, get stuff. Get loads of viruses on your computer by finding the copy of a film you can't get in the UK because but it's not available because the BBFC won't give a certificate. But you can go on the internet and find a copy from some weird place that's going to be loaded with viruses. And sit there and watch it. Then watch something else afterwards. You can be corrupted by all this, and this is the thing now is desensitization, which I personally don't play video games, but video games now, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. You can all disagree with me if you want. Video games are a lot worse than films are, but films are the easier one to blame.
Yeah.
And films have always been the medium. Film and music are the easier ones to blame. It's like I don't really want to bring light to the whole thing and use it so trivial as a podcast like this about films. But the controversy surrounding Child's Play 3, it was in the house and
the James Bulger thing,
and I don't like that. I don't want to draw attention to it because it's anything like that. But the whole argument when Child's Play 3 was had all this hassle was, did they kids watch this film that was in the house of one of the parents?
Yeah, and it's irrelevant, really, isn't it? Because this whole argument circulates every 10 years or so, and it really annoys me because it's taken the reverse way around to a problem that politicians simply can't or won't solve. So they pick on something like films or music or video games. It's that art makes people violent. No, art is violent because society is violent. It's not the other way around, and it's never been the other way around. Shakespeare is violent, the Bible is violent, Homer is violent. It's not this sudden urge in the 80s that we all thought, oh, I've just seen Day of the Dead, I want to go and shoot someone in the head because they might be a zombie. It doesn't make any sense, do it, saying things like that. And it's like saying, oh, we found a copy of Child's Play 3 in this kid's room, so he must have killed this little boy. Well, did you also have milk in the fridge? Because I've got milk in my fridge. Does that make me a serial killer? It's just the logic is just not. It doesn't even make any sense.
This goes back to the whole thing of video nasty. It's corruption.
Yeah.
But it's easier to blame all society's problems on something like that.
Yeah.
So it's. But if you look at the way the 80s horror started out, if you bleed from the 70s and 80s. That's not a pun, I'm trying not to. There was from the 70s, you had the gore and everything, where you had the 18 certificates.
Yeah.
That by the end, I'm looking specifically at the Halloween, the Elm Streets, and the Friday the 13th. The first one, they started out as horrors, but by the end, they became more of children's films.
Yeah.
You're rooting for the
villain.
Not the heroes. And if you look at Nightmare 1, where Freddy's truly menacing, then by the second one he becomes more quippy, then the third one he becomes even more quippy. So by the time you hit the mid to late 80s, which is when you hit the MTV generation with I'm looking specifically at Nightmare 4 and 5, mainly 4.
6 especially. 6 is really hokey with the whole Freddy quipping thing, I think.
Yeah. If you look, Nightmare 4 and Jason 8 are pure MTV generation 80s movies where you don't care about the heroine or hero. You're just more about this is gonna be good.
What's he gonna kill them with here?
We're here to see how inventive they all are. And it's you could also argue there, and this is something that just hit me as we're saying this, the tonal shift from being 18 certificates to 15 certificates, and going down the route that we are now with the likes of Terminator and Predator and the likes of these 18 certificate movies that have now been watered down.
Alien as well,
but I want to say something with the Alien versus Predator. But when you look at Covenant and Prometheus, when I watch that now, some bits I'm on the edge of my seat, and that's if I'm right, that's 18 again, isn't it? Covenant was.
I don't know. I thought it was a 15. Was it not?
Whatever one it was still the shot value.
Oh yeah.
And the new Halloween movie got back to it's kind of bypassed the 80s and 90s and went straight back to 78 again with Danny McBride. I can't remember who directed.
David Gordon Green.
Yeah, that Halloween movie has gone from 78 to now.
Yeah.
Bang, and I'm like,
with
wow.
nothing in between, so they cut out all the debris
and that was scary. But the stuff from the 80s, they marketed toys in the 80s at kids around the serial killers.
Yeah, I think the tonal shift it's quite obvious when you look at the 70s. Well, if you go back to the 50s and 60s are all nuclear war and you know, mutants and stuff like that, Godzilla, them, you know, giant ants and stuff like that. Then you go to the 70s where it's like malevolent horror, where the home is invaded by things like demons, and you've got like The Omen, you've got The Exorcist, but the home being a sacred place that's violated. So you've got Texas Chainsaw Massacre, then later Halloween, which invents, you know, by an accident invents the slasher genre as well. You know, like it's the holy place where the Amityville horror. It's all like supernatural goings on inside the house that makes it not the house. And in the 80s, like you say, it just goes full whack with marketing. You know, kids get interested in horror, and then the MTV thing just happens as well. I think the 80s is where the whole sort of horror becomes colourful. Yeah. Not to use a kind of strange metaphor, but
that's the thing that gets you. It was, you know, it's like advertising on cigarettes.
Yeah.
And stuff is, and you know, you make it appealing to the younger people, and that's what going into video shops was. And this is what modern day generation are completely missing.
Yeah.
Is
it's like the explicit lyrics label, isn't it, on CDs?
Yeah.
It just makes you want to listen more, doesn't it?
That's true.
It's just the same thing, you know.
And 18, this game is 18, and you know kids are going to play them.
Not to be played by anyone under 18, and then you hear like 9-year-old kids online playing it, and you think, you're not even allowed to play this. What are you doing?
Thor, noob masters on again.
Yeah. But I mean, then, and like we said in one of the other podcasts about RoboCop, it's weird how, you know, that's an ultra violent movie. The first one is really violent, and yet it's very, very. It appealed to me as a kid. I watched RoboCop when I way before I should have. You know, my dad had it taped or something like that. I can't. And like it's now regarded as one of it's one of my favorite films of all time. But it's just strange that appeals to a child, because it is really disturbing. It's a very disturbing film. But I don't know.
I can actually answer that question for you, because I was the age of parent when that film came out.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, now, yeah, that makes me sound old again. The whole idea of RoboCop, robot and a cop, yeah. Bear in mind, this is the end of, this is, you know, after Return of the Jedi, everybody had sci-fi fatigue. It's not like now it's constantly
fantasy, going. Wasn't it?
Yeah. So after RoboCop, after the boom going down with science fiction, because everybody was sick of it with Star Wars and Star Trek, RoboCop comes along, and it was so different, and it wasn't about the gore for kids.
No,
it wasn't, and the whole social commentary is all lost.
It's there if you want it.
Yeah, but it's lost when you're a kid. It's a guy that gets killed that's brought back to life as a robot.
Yeah,
and
he's a cop.
Yeah. That is so cool when you're a kid. Yeah. And the bit where at the end the guy gets put in the acid, that's like gross.
See, I never saw that, because I think we had a recorded of it off the telly, so it was probably heavily censored when I saw it, and I didn't even see that scene. And when my dad finally bought it for me on VHS, and I saw the uncut version, that scared me for months. That scene, I used to just call him me and my friend used to just call him Toxic Man, because it's just such a surreal scene that only Verhoeven could do, right? But it's jarring out especially when the version you've seen didn't have as much. I mean, the whole, you know, spike in the neck is cut down as well, and his arm coming off. Kurtwood Smith still terrifies me to this day. But that scene was cut down as well. So there was that sort of, you know, TV censorship thing from taping that you always got, and then when you saw the original version, you were like, wow, this is not what I saw before.
But it's good, and
you don't get that anymore.
It's you know, because as I said, I was about 13, 14 when RoboCop came out. I didn't see it at the cinema, but I saw the others. Seen the other 2 and the sequel. Yeah. The remake, and it's because, and the thing is, and even the RoboCop 2 had its moments. The bit where they rip Kane's head off.
Yeah, RoboCop 2's got the tone correct, but it's just it just feels like a misstep of a sequel, if you know what I mean. And then RoboCop 3 is just totally a kids film. Yeah, Nuke. Yeah. That's the whole drug thing as well. That's another thing I never picked up when I was younger, though. But yeah, no, I think I understand now. Yeah, about RoboCop. It's not even a horror, but I mean, it fits in with
it
that
does,
aesthetic, doesn't it?
Then again, Alien's not technically a horror, but you can fit it in.
Yeah.
But it's classified as but.
Well, I always thought of Alien as it's sort of like a equal parts haunted house, you know, in space, equal parts slasher, and then I suppose a little bit even more equal parts Jaws in space, isn't it? Because I always like anything that seems Jaws like, you know, we will say Jaws in whatever, you know, or Honor, whatever.
Like Die Hard.
Like Die Hard, yeah, exactly, yeah. But yeah, Alien's an interesting one as well, because that sort of, in a way, brought back sci-fi as well, didn't it, into a more respectable place.
Alien and Aliens were really,
because they're so tonally different. You know, you go from the first one being a pure horror to the second one being an action horror sci-fi. You know, that's a weird combination for 1986. Yeah.
It's good. They're both good. I mean, I gotta admit, I do like Alien. I think after watching it,
Alien's
Alien, when you watch it, if you ever get the opportunity, watch Alien on a big screen. It's superb.
Even in between that, you had. It's not technically a horror film, but I've always thought of the first Terminator film as really scary. You know,
sci-fi horror to me.
Because of how, like, again, it's the slasher formula mixed in, because of how relentless Arnie is in it. You know, I've always thought of the first one as a horror film.
Okay, I'm gonna be very unpopular and say I don't like the other. I've watched
I think the first one is the best. But I definitely do. Terminator 2 is good, but it was more of an action advertiser than it was. You know, like the first one was really cerebral and scary. And,
it was.
You know, it was like relentless. Like even the editing and the pace of the film. You know, that's peak Cameron for me. Like skill wise.
I think it's a perfect film, and I guess didn't need a sequel.
No.
Or any of the sequels. But to me, I tonally I see Terminator, then I see all the sequels. I'm sorry, but I see Terminator 2 with the other sequels as well, because it was scary.
That continuity, isn't it? Where they sort of try and go more into Judgment Day. Like you didn't really need that in the first one. You just knew this was going to happen, and there was nothing you could do about it.
And the music at the end.
The techno stuff. Yeah.
And I'm thinking more of the ending is the who's it? This is
Brad Fiedel, I think.
Yeah. The music in it, the Terminator theme, and the crushing of it's all everything.
You Terminator fucker.
I like that. Yeah. And when she drives off into the unknown future.
Yeah.
I think that's
great. Yeah, there's a storm coming.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And you don't need any of the sequels. And
no.
You have Arnold Schwarzenegger playing the bad guy to playing the good guy and all the rest of them. And it's to me,
it's kind of a waste because he was a really good bad guy.
Yeah.
Like it's like we were saying on the last one about Christopher Lee. Like he made a really good guy whenever he did do it. Rarely.
Yeah.
And it's strange how they've never used that again with Arnie.
People think Arnie's cuddly and everything.
Yeah,
and
it's like Stallone though, isn't it? I mean, I can't think of any time I've ever seen Stallone play a bad guy. Maybe Copland's the closest.
Spy Kids 3.
Oh, Spy Kids 3, yeah. We won't mention that.
No.
Yeah, no, it's just these people that generally play good guys are good at that, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know. That's a separate topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
I'm going to go a little bit off topic, off notes. I got one, 80s, that's a horror film, but it's literally everything that is the 80s.
Okay.
Vampire movie.
Oh, Fright Night, yeah.
I was thinking of Fright Night, but Fright?
Oh, The Lost Boys, yeah, sorry.
Fright Night is bloody good, and I actually like the
good,
remake as well. But
yeah, I've not seen the remake actually. I don't know what
I like David Tennant in it.
Yeah, no, they're actually both quite good counterpoints to each other because Lost Boys goes for the definite horror over the comedy. Although there is some it's got dark humour. Friday Night's full on comedy for me. Not in the sense of slapstick, bless you.
Thank you.
But in the tone of the movie is definitely they were going for a comedy. Weren't they? I mean, I think it's sort of incidentally written into Lost Boys.
Roddy McDowall in.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And Chris Sarandon as well.
Lost Boys is.
I think that's probably the best vampire movie of all time.
I'm gonna quickly.
I don't know if
soundtrack to Lost Boys.
Yeah.
Is it goes to prove that the director of Batman and Robin can do some.
Yeah, Joel Schumacher's good. He's good at thrillers as well. I mean, Falling Down and.
I haven't seen that.
Number 23 is not great, but it shows what he can do.
That was dark.
Yeah, it's dark. Yeah, he can.
Lost
he can
in the
do
shadows. That. Good time to let the sun go down on me. Cry Little Sister on the Lost Boys soundtrack. That is. I still believe when they're the saxophone song.
Yeah.
Watching Lost Boys on a big screen is just.
Yeah, I missed that.
I loved it. It's one of my fiance's favourite movies, and so to actually see that, I think it was a couple of years ago for the anniversary. It was just we were sitting there watching it, and I had a newfound appreciation for the movie. And the soundtrack is.
It's great. It's a fantastic vampire movie. I mean, I actually do prefer the vampire movies that don't take the original source material as like Holy Writ. So when you're in the mood for a gothic horror, Dracula film, then they're great. But they're at their best, they're campy. You can't get past the campiness of them. Even I honestly don't see why people like the Coppola Dracula, because it just seems like Hammer in the 90s to me.
I never watched. I was going out of horror by that time.
I just don't like. It's strange that that and Frankenstein are two of the most famous novels ever written, and probably no one knows the actual story of the books over the films. It's just a strange phenomenon.
Flatliners. I remember seeing that.
I
know that's 1990.
That's the 90s,
but it bleeds in as November 1990.
It is
Schumacher, that
Schumacher,
reminds me of Joel Schumacher.
Yeah, with Sutherland again.
Pardon?
With Kiefer Sutherland again.
Yeah, it reminded me because I was thinking of 80s, and I remember seeing that on the big screen. And that was a 15, and I remember coming out of that one. That was freaky deaky.
Yeah, the remake's terrible. Don't watch it.
I was so freaked out by the first one. It was literally I just.
Yeah, I think the 80s as well is the time where horror experiments with itself, without sounding like a Glenn Quagmire quote there. But you get things like mixing horror with comedy, like Fright Night, and then you get things like Gremlins, where you mix horror with children films.
Oh, come on, the little bit.
Yeah.
That's my worst interpretation, but I did it for less than 10 seconds, no copyright.
Yeah, so, but like, I mean, you open that movie and it's like a family film at first with Gizmo in it, and then it just does a 180 and absolutely it's still got the slapstick in there, because I think Joe Dante's a big fan of the Three Stooges, isn't he? Yeah. But it like Evil Dead did. Evil Dead 2, again experimental. It takes the first one that was heavily like frowned upon and banned. I don't know if it was banned. I think banned in quote marks is probably a better word. And it made it into
it was a video
comedy.
masterpiece.
And you would never think that Evil Dead could be a comedy in 1989. I wouldn't imagine so.
Army of Darkness 92.
Yeah, and then it followed. Obviously, my Army of Darkness follows, doesn't it? Which is a pure comedy.
Yeah.
But that's the genius of Sam Raimi, who can do so many different things with horror. I mean, if you've ever seen Darkman, that's another one, mixed superhero. And then I don't personally like Drag Me to Hell, but that's another thing where he mixes the slapstick. I mean, there's a lot of readings of it as an eating disorder, but it's just I'm not personally a fan of it, but there are moments where the Raimi stuff comes through and makes you laugh. But even in Spider-Man, you've got the cameos with Bruce Campbell. He's good at poking fun at what he's doing, and I think that's what makes him quite.
He's in literally pretty much every Raimi film, isn't he?
I think so, yeah. Apart from Quick and the Dead, possibly. But I think the 80s is the experimental time for horror, where it sort of pays off. Sometimes it doesn't, but
practical effects.
Yeah, practical, yeah.
And I remember because I used to read Fangoria during this period.
Oh yeah, I loved Fangoria.
And you literally see all these. Like you said, Tom Savini,
Rick Baker,
and the K&B people were getting their start.
Oh yeah, like Greg Nicotero
and I'm having brain freeze here. The people who did the effects on the Elm Street movies, Kevin Yeager, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And you look at all those. You literally you find magazines like Fangoria, and they were literally full of films like Society.
Yeah.
Nightbreed again.
Screaming Mad George. He's another big 80s makeup guy. Yeah. Nightbreed definitely. Yeah.
Like really, I know it's 1990, but it was in production in the 80s. I saw that on the cinema. That's an 18 certificate.
Even just Barker horror in general.
Yeah.
That sort of changed the game in the late 80s.
Hellraiser,
yeah.
God, I remember seeing that on video and it freaked me out.
Hellraiser's, yeah, but Hellraiser's all one of those. It's like it is freaky, but it's like a beautiful movie. You can't look away.
87. That freaked me out. That is British horror.
The first three first two are still fantastic.
I remember watching. I've seen the first two, and I remember watching
Stop
them.
there.
Yeah, those two they were gory. They were gruesome,
yeah. But the gore was kind of not pretty, but you know the way it was staged, you didn't want to look away, or you did want to look away, but you felt you couldn't because you were thinking, how did they do that? I want to see on. You know, that's how the best effects should work.
Yeah,
definitely.
I totally agree. The thing though was when Hellraiser came out, and I was into the Jason and Freddy films.
Yeah.
So you look at something like Hellraiser, which takes me back to the 70s style because it was horror.
Yeah.
That was like horror aimed at
pure
adults.
and simple.
It was. Whereas your Freddy's and your Jasons and your slasher films were like your little alcopops.
They're the adolescents.
Yeah.
Of the genre, and even something like Halloween, that was languishing in the 80s. Really badly.
But that's because it was now. Michael Myers was said in the same breath as Jason and Freddy.
Yeah, and I think he didn't translate to that mindset as well as those two because they were created in the 80s. I think, Friday the 13th was written in 79, but I think like the attitude of that sort of mindset. Well, I mean, Jason's not even in the first one, is he?
No,
but
was just
when he comes along, so 1982, I think it is 1981 part 2. That attitude's already prevalent where we're taking the side of the camera takes the side of the slasher and not the victim.
81.
81, okay, yeah. So they were basically a year, weren't they?
Yeah, because they literally brought one out every year.
Whereas you go back to the original Halloween and the viewpoint is very much on the victims a lot of the time. It's on Michael Myers a few times, but I think these films explicitly were on the side of the killer.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, people say, oh yeah, that's 80s horror all over. Dario Argento was doing things like that in the 70s in Italy. All of his films are from the perspective of the killer. I mean, you see like Leather Gloves in Shot. That's a Giallo Argento thing. And he was saying, someone said to him, are you sexist that you kill a lot of women in your film? And he was saying, well, would you rather look at a beautiful woman being killed or a big ugly guy? And it speaks to that unconscious thing of like beautiful women look even more beautiful when they're being murdered. Discuss.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? It's that.
But don't go out. And,
don't do it. Don't copy it. But it's that attitude that people think came from the 80s that was actually already there. The 80s just popularised it.
A big, beautiful woman looks better on a film case.
Yeah, exactly. Than a big hairy guy.
Yeah, but then again, if you look at the 80s, all the males that were the last survivor were always the feminine ones. If you look at Johnny Depp, in Elm Street, even though he doesn't survive, but you got him, then you've got then you've got Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, and if you actually go back to the 80s and look at the slashers, it's very hard. You could probably count on one hand the amount of times you get a final boy. Other than a final girl, I can only think of a few films off the top of my head.
Friday 4.
The Burning, which is ironically a Friday the 13th rip-off, that has a final boy.
Ooh.
But it's
the feminine boy.
He's a very creepy guy. Like you don't even like him. He's like looks at women in the shower and that sort of creepy guy.
That's actually creepy in itself. That the creepy guy actually lives.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? But I forgot about Friday. Which one was it? Friday 4? Did you say?
Yeah. Corey Feldman.
Yeah, Corey Feldman. Yeah.
See, we're on that little bit of a period. We've got to discuss the music.
Oh god, yeah.
80s rock or metal, the hair.
Yeah, and especially like in really inopportune moments, like party scenes where people are being murdered off screen, and you cut to some guys that are Bon Jovi wannabes. It's just, I don't know. It's just. It's something that will never be repeated because the 80s was so singular.
The Dokken, was it Dokken?
Oh, Dokken, yeah.
89 Pet Cemetery. Oh yeah. Ramones.
Yeah.
And that's like, and even the video is not very, the music video for it. You got the Ramones singing in a cemetery and everything. It's just may they rest in peace.
Yeah. I was never a massive fan of Pet Sematary actually.
I did. Like it, I liked it. Yeah. I haven't seen it since the 90s, but I liked it because I got turned away from the cinema. Because let's have a look. It was I'm sure that was an 18 certificate. This is one of the reasons. Yeah, it was an 18 certificate and it came out in 89. So I'm not going to say how old I was going to be then, but it was definitely not old enough to see the film. I went. How old are you?
Old enough.
Old enough. Yeah. When's your birthday?
Every year.
We have to go back to Edgar Wright, don't we? Yeah, but I was definitely an older, so I was a young go see this. Like I saw, like, you got to remember, there was like trailer shows on in the middle of the night, so I'd get up all videotape the trailer shows, movies, and the likes.
Of course, you had like Siskel and Ebert at the movies as well.
Yeah. So you get up in the middle of the night just to watch these programs, or you'd literally video. So in the morning you'd be watching these trailer shows.
Yeah.
Because there was no internet or anything like that. So literally all you get to do is you watch these shows and you're like, I remember getting up 30 years ago just to watch a trailer to Back to the Future because I knew the trailer was going to be on this show. Because it wasn't like now where you just type in.
Yeah, on YouTube. Yeah.
So it'd be like the Back to the Future Part 2 trailer.
You don't even have to do anything. You just set notifications up now, don't you?
Yeah, it's like, today the trailer for this is going to drop, so you'd be ready just so you can see it. But back then it was, you'd literally have to know where a trailer was going to be.
Yeah.
And you'd see the trailers for these sort of films, and I got turned, so go back on the subject, I got turned away from the Pet Sematary. I am not getting turned away. I'm seeing this film. I'm old enough to see this film. I figured by the second time they worked out that I was going to keep coming every night till I saw this film. So I go see the film. Then there's the bit where the sister is like, she's just like a woman with like prosthetics all in white. Where she sits up in the bed. That freaked me out. I'm like walking home, and then afterwards I'm like still freaked out by this woman in white. And then I'm like going, that's why it's an 18 certificate. Yeah. It's like so simple, and I was so freaked out by it.
Creepy cats as well.
Yeah.
Cats are always creepy.
But that's why these were 18 certificates. But it was the appeal to people that are under 18s, and we could get away with it. Again, trawling around video stores again, as I keep going back to. But Alice Cooper, again, I'm going back on the subject, going from Ramon to, but Alice Cooper doing the score, he's back the man behind the mask from Friday 6.
Friday 6, yeah, and he's also plays Freddy's father, doesn't he?
Yeah, and that was in
Freddy 6, 91?
91. This is the whole thing that where people were so 91 it was.
Yeah.
But this is when it came out. Yeah, it came out in 91. This is why people are so lucky nowadays. Is that if you were doing these sort of things, you'd have to literally have your big Hollywood film guide.
Oh, God,
now we can just literally find out the years for these films by just asking
IMDb,
or Ask Alexa does the same thing.
Or Ask Alexa, yeah.
So it's and this is the thing in the 80s, you had to know about these things, whereas nowadays you can just go on and you've got all the films that are coming out of a certain genre.
There was some work involved, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And it's like a treasure hunt.
And it goes back to the whole thing about video. We're gonna have to do a podcast on video stores.
Yeah, definitely.
And I miss video stores.
There's a couple of great documentaries about VHS actually that we'll mention in that. But
you're gonna have to send me these links, please.
Yeah, no, I will do. Yeah, no, but I mean, it was like a whole different era, wasn't it? I mean, one thing I did want to discuss as well was, the ultra banned films. Things like Necromantic and really, really stuff that you could be like, properly arrested for having. Like, because there was different bands of the video nasties, I think, wasn't there? And then band one was like the ones that were literally like in a court. You can't have these films; they're illegal. They're morally corrupt and depraved. And I think probably half of those films are absolute rubbish. And Necromantic's not rubbish, but it's purely made to shock people. I mean, the director admitted that. 1984, I believe.
I think because Necroman.
Spelled with a K, I think.
N-E-K.
Yeah. Yeah, there is.
Necromantic.
Oh, 87.
1987.
Yeah. So
let's see what they have
we're reaching the end of the.
This is what it says. 1987. Jorg Buttergeit.
Buttergeit, yeah. He's done a few other films that are similar, like a film called The Toad's King, and he did Necromantic 2 as well, I think.
This is the synopsis. A street sweeper who cleans up after grisly accident brings home a full corpse for him and his wife to enjoy sexually, but is dismayed to see that his wife prefers to corpse over him.
It's a love story. That's why it was banned. Yeah, it's literally described as a love story about death.
Yeah,
and I don't think a lot of people read so much into that film, and it was made just to shock people.
The sequel was 91.
See, this is the sort of beginning of the gore shocking thing, where you made films to shock people and not because you wanted to make a statement. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't want to make a statement. Apparently there's a lot of, East-West Berlin political rhetoric underneath it all, but it's just, I think the start of the, they call it torture porn now, don't they? Was with this, and specifically, and then it comes full swing in, I think, a lot later as well, in the early 2000s. That's when it sort of takes off with Saw and Hostel and things like that. And but then you go back to even before this, and it's the beginning of viral marketing, and what's it called? Found footage.
Yeah.
With things like Cannibal Holocaust, where it's the film's like under the guise of a documentary that the police have found the tape and they're going through it and that's the plot of every found footage movie now. That this is footage we found and we're going through it to see what happened to these people.
But these get lost because of the likes of the Blair Witch Project.
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, this is one that caused loads of controversy because it has real animal deaths in it.
Oh, I can understand.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't watch it because of that. But when it first came out, I think there was loads of people were having a panic because they thought, this is real footage. No one had ever done a found footage film before, and they actually had to produce the actors in the court case against it to say that they weren't dead.
Here's the synopsis. This is Cannibal Holocaust 1980. During a rescue mission into the Amazon rainforest, a professor stumbles across a lost film shot by a missing documentary crew.
Yeah, that sounds like every found footage film, doesn't it? Yeah.
But the thing is, people look over that now, but then again, I suppose at the time...
It's a terrible film, it's not well made, but it's pioneering in the sense of that, that form, which the Blair Witch perfects. That's the best found footage film ever made. It's in my opinion. But it's a genre that's so overloaded now as well in horror that back then no one had heard of that sort of thing, and it's the 80s being experimental again.
But if you look at this sort of thing,
whereas
we're sitting now when we're doing all this referencing, I'll be honest with you, if you haven't already realised, we're on IMDb fact checking as we go along.
Yeah,
but you couldn't do it back then. You couldn't find out. You'd hear the name of it, but you wouldn't be able to find out who was in it.
No, or direct.
And it worked perfectly.
Nobody directed it, but yeah, it seemed like back then when no one could verify this was fake.
Yeah,
that must have been scary, or work to the appeal of it. Same with the Blair Witch is sort of at the beginning of the internet, isn't it? The late 90s, mid to late 90s is where the internet starts up, but there was no real sort of impetus towards people saying, oh, that's fake, that's not real. When that first came out, I genuinely believed that was a real film based with real found footage. People were saying in the paper, this is the scariest film ever made. I won't go that far now, but it is very, very terrifying. It's well made because of how low the budget is. But it's that sort of mystique behind it. They kind of did it with The Dark Knight, where they had throughout Chicago, they put posters of the Joker saying like, have you seen this man and stuff. And that sort of stuff's missing from films now, I think, the viral marketing aspect. I mean, it's in a way it's taken to the extreme now, in the sense of watch the trailer at midnight on Twitter, and stuff like that. That's not really viral marketing. That's just throwing it in our faces.
Studios are pulling back because of money now, isn't it? Because everything's going to Netflix, and anything's got a cinema release is going to be a big superhero film, so that's the problem.
Yeah.
Something that, because like I said, for me, video nasties were always The Exorcist and Evil Dead. Those were the two that always...
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, Texas Chainsaw. But, mentioning these films, Cannibal Holocaust and Necromantic...
This was the video nasty as well, this was banned.
It kind of, reading the synopsis, what kind of makes me realise that is less sinister than turning someone like a child murderer in Freddy Krueger into someone that is relatable to younger people, because you're rooting for a child killer who's going around killing. That seems
a lot more... Like Chucky, where when he was human, he was he's a serial killer, and now he's in a doll, which is a thing children play with. That's fucking sinister as well. Yeah. You know, compared to just some cannibals that, yeah, they're a bit racist now, but it's not. You know, it's not like.
That strikes me as people going off of literally seeing something and seeing a word or a keyword and going off on one, but letting the stuff that's right in your face go under.
I don't get it.
And you know,
even Saw is worse than Cannibal Holocaust. You know, for visceral gore.
Yeah. I turn off the gore.
Strange. Yeah, I do like a gore film now and again, but I tend to like them being comedic. Yeah. Because it's, I suppose, I don't know, it's sort of, I mean, there's a film on Netflix called The Babysitter, and that's really gory, but it's so cartoonishly gory that you know it's a love letter to the 80s. I think there's a lot of that coming back now, you know, with something like Stranger Things. Yeah. That's a love letter to 80s horror and science fiction, but there's loads of films that are sort of taking that 80s aesthetic and, you know, pushing it further now. And the independent scene is thankfully back in horror now with people like Jason Blum and all the Blumhouse films. They're like a big low budget company, which I think has been famous now because of the Halloween reboot. But I mean, I'd like horror to go back to the old independent thing where we have the independent ideas. If you do a remake or a reboot, do it in an independent style. You know, that sort of thing. I don't like this mass market pushing it down your throat horror that like you say started in the 80s with the MTV thing, but I think it's just reached its sort of the trough now where it's just getting on everyone's nerves where they're just rebooting everything.
I think with the new Halloween, which was brilliant, and I don't do horror films. You actually got me. You actually said watch this film, and to me I was on the edge of my seat. That's how, and like I said, I don't like horror as a rule, but Halloween, and I will go and see this. We'll go see the new one when it comes out. That just because it was pure terror. You know what hit me when I was doing these notes for this podcast, because this is one of these on spur ones, is that back in the 80s you had cinemas had about 2 screens.
Yeah.
And they would show more movies, and you'd get more movies out. You'd literally get these horror films. You know, they wouldn't see the light of day these days at cinemas. You go straight onto streaming or straight onto. There's no video stores anymore. You'd have to be route them out on a DVD in some weird shop. But it'd be mainly going to streaming services.
Yeah, I mean Blockbuster went under, didn't it?
Yeah.
There's no need for it anymore. I mean, no need as in financially.
Problem is, I mean, for me, I stopped renting videos when I could buy videos. DVDs, because they become so cheap. You could literally pay £3-4 for a video. You could just go and buy them. But I used to love going into shops, and I used to love going to HMV, and I still go to HMV, where they've got like loads of Blu-rays now and DVDs, and you just finding things. I love looking on the shelves, and nowadays it's not so many selection. It's because films get buried in streaming.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's what
100%.
And I like being able to know that I could go to the cinema and see these horror films and these 18 certificate movies. The cinema that only has 2 screens, but you've got multiplex, it's got 8 screens plus, and they're showing nothing but mainstream shite.
Commercial, yeah.
It really annoys me. It really, really annoys me that I could go 30 plus years ago, 30 years ago, I could go to the cinema in '89 and see films like, you know, that you can't see now. I can go see these Elm Streets or the Friday the 13th or these obscure horror films that have got the really cool film poster because they were getting cinema release.
Yeah.
And it pees me right off that now that you don't get that chance because you're gonna have the Totem film.
Yeah, yeah.
Then you rest of them you're gonna have to find buried somewhere in a streaming service. It's like typing in B movies on Amazon or Netflix just to see if I can find something that I might want to watch later. Just like so stupid.
A lot of them are just really shite.
I miss going to the video stores, and I've said it before, and I'm gonna say it again. I really miss video stores.
Yeah, like the principle of them was always like what attracted me, like renting a new movie at the end of every weekend. You know, my dad or my mum would come with me, and I'd go and hide, and they'd get the 18 film for me. You know, but it was just, and then my friend Jordan is the one that got me into horror properly. You know, so shout out to him, because I used to be terrified of horror, and then I remember vividly the film that got me into horror was George A. Romero's Day of the Dead, and I remember he bought that in HMV, funnily enough, actually, or his dad bought it for him, I think, and they put it on when we got back, and I was like, oh well, do you mind if I go upstairs, because this is too scary, and I couldn't move. Like I kept going to leave, and then there'd be like a Tom Savini gore fest zombie scene coming up, and I don't know what it was that just made me keep thinking, I need to see how this plays out. I need to see what this looks like. And then for weeks I couldn't sleep thinking there were zombies under my bed. And then I gradually sort of branched out, watched Dawn of the Dead, watched Night of the Living Dead, and I watched Halloween. And I found out that below that layer of fear, that's what you enjoy in horror. And I think that a lot of that's missing. The independent horror films in the last few years have got that sort of joie de vivre of horror back. I'm thinking films like Hereditary. That's a great film. If you get to see that, it's really good. There's a film called Midsummer, came out this year. Same director. I haven't seen it, but apparently it's the same sort of, like the new Halloween. Yeah. They're bringing that sort of the atmosphere of let's watch this on Halloween with some mates, or that bring that back and scare people again. Don't just gore is just disgusting. It's not scary. Yeah. Fear is fear.
Again, it goes back to the Shark and Jaws and Michael Myers.
Duel as well. Yeah. Spielberg's the master of thrillers. In some ways, in others he's good at like childhood stuff. A bit and it goes all the way back to Hitchcock saying about the bomb under the table. If you don't show it, if you show it, and then the tensions are ramped up because you're thinking there's a bomb under the table, please hurry up. Whereas if you don't mention it and then you show it at the end, it's a cheap trick.
For me, the whole is with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
You think you know the ending
because it's the Sharon Tate thing. Yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah. Sorry.
And if you've not seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, please skip over the next minute or so. The bit where you think that the whole Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because you see Sharon Tate at the start.
Yeah.
You think it's going to be the ending is going to be about her murder.
And the Kurt Russell narration, like it's a documentary.
And that kind of like throws you off for the ending.
Yeah,
but it's.
I remember you saying you were feeling a bit sort of uneasy, weren't you?
For the whole film.
What's coming.
And then when it doesn't happen, it's just like.
Whew. It's like a release. Yeah.
That was pure. That was why I preferred it the second time. But I liked the tension I had the first time I saw it.
I mean, Tarantino's a big horror fan, isn't he? So I think he's already sort of clued into that mindset.
Death Proof Planet Terror. Yeah,
see, Planet Terror is fantastic. I think, like as a send up of that.
Robert Rodriguez, shout out to my man Robert Rodriguez.
And then Death Proof is basally just a slasher movie with a car.
Oh, love it. Kurt Russell.
What could you want? Yeah, Kurt Russell.
What's your car?
You got MacReady from The Thing.
Yeah. Oh, that was good. We watched that earlier this year. That was.
I'm so glad I got to show you that because
that was brilliant.
That's one of those. I did actually want to mention The Thing. I just remembered about sci-fi mixing with horror perfectly. Because 1982 was the year of overlooked sci-fi films. I think Blade Runner, The Thing. There is another one, isn't there? Is there?
Starman, was it?
Is that it?
Horror.
No, but those two great films are overlooked because of E.T. And it's that saccharine sweetness that sort of killed interest in it. Because I mean, the effects in The Thing.
No, Starman was 84.
Oh, Starman was 84.
I know there was something else though.
Same director.
Yeah.
But yeah, the effects in The Thing are, to me, they're still fantastic.
Brilliant.
You watched. There was like a prequel, sequel kind of film they did, and a lot of it was all augmented by CG, and it's the work that they put into the effects that you miss now.
Well, I know what got me about when we watched The Thing was, and it was the colour palette they used. When they were outside in the snow.
Yeah, it's very white and blue and.
I felt
dark.
cold. Yeah, I felt cold watching the film.
And the score as well.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, just two notes. That's like a Jaws score. It's the simplicity.
I thought that was. This is what I love about doing these podcasts and everything. Is introducing, doing these and discovering or rediscovering movies.
Carpenter's. I mean, it's strange because John Carpenter, for me, he's probably my favourite horror director. If I was to pick, he's a great director in general. He's so underrated in like film studies and people not mentioning his name when you come to pivotal things. I mean, he's the guy that single-handedly brought about the slasher movie unintentionally with Halloween, then the effects boom with The Thing. He did haunted house stuff with The Fog, which is a great little, like, it's a nice little, you know, haunted town movie where the past comes back to bite them in the arse, you know, like, and then he did things like Assault on Precinct 13, a thriller, The Warriors, a gang movie. You know, he's such a diverse guy. And even his bad films like not Mission to Mars, Ghosts of Mars, and
I want to see that because it's got
no, not Alice Cooper.
No, Ghosts of Mars, and then it's got
Pangria.
I love Pangria.
And then even something like Vampires, which is not critically lauded, but he always brings this experimentation to his films, and I think that comes about as sort of becoming a director in the 80s and staying on the independent scene, because The Thing flopped really badly because of E.T. obviously, and so did Blade Runner. So
but we're still talking about those more than we
are indeed, yeah. So it pushed him back to his independent roots, and then he did something like comedy action, like Big Trouble in Little China, and action itself with Escape from New York.
Escape from New York, and did he do Escape from LA as well?
He did do, Escape from LA. Yeah,
that's still freaky dicky, the bit where the plastic surgery.
Oh, it was ironically
that
Bruce Campbell.
Freaked me out. That freaked me out. People. It freaked me out that bit. That alone did.
But I mean, it's that sort of. You got directors like that back then who are willing to take the risks. Brian De Palma's another one that springs to mind.
You know, Blowout. He did Blowout.
Blowout's a fantastic deconstruction of horror.
I will have to see that.
I mean,
I'm still haven't watched.
John Travolta plays a sound effects technician on a slasher film, and then the film opens with, sorry, spoilers, opens with like the perspective from a slasher movie where some guy's walking up to some girl in the shower, you know, and she's naked and all that, and then you just suddenly hear someone, excuse me, yelling "cut," and it's been a film within a film.
I've seen it. It's
good. It's great.
Because I remember because it's got Nancy Allen in it.
Yeah, and John Lithgow.
God, I haven't seen that in 30 odd plus years. That's more than 30 years.
De Palma's another one that sort of goes his own route with the thriller. He's always unfairly called like a poor man's Hitchcock, but he's great. He's made some great films. You know, Carrie and that, Scarface. He's a great sort of hands-on guy that does a lot with a little budget.
You said about being overlooked, and they hit me. I just want to go back a little bit. You ever thought there were people overlooked because all film students and all film people, they always go out Scorsese and Tarantino, and they're both great directors. I love Quentin Tarantino. I truly love Quentin Tarantino. Him and Robert Rodriguez are two of my favorite directors. But you do find that people go on more about Quentin Tarantino and Scorsese.
Yeah, this is. I mean, I think this is from personal experience of both of us. But in academia, when you look at film, people stay in specific camps, and it's really sort of like the outlooks are all pompous and upper class, and you know, the French New Wave changed everything in film, and then Italian neorealism, blah blah blah, and they don't acknowledge things like fantasy, science fiction, horror, even though those three categories have the best-selling films of all time within them. And I think it's just sort of pomposity of, well, you know, it's been compared to pornography horror, and you think, you know, why does that make it not art?
No,
it's I don't know.
You think it's going to go slightly off subject, so I'm going back on subject. The thing is, if you look at Star Wars, most people think Star Wars is a blockbuster.
Yeah.
But Star Wars created the used universe, which spread to Alien, which spread to Blade Runner, and every modern day science fiction film or anything that you see cinema is now based upon something George Lucas did, but people don't see George Lucas.
Is it not, as we've said about New Hope being perfect, shot for shot is perfect?
It is.
You know, is it not the greatest deconstruction of cinema anyone's ever done, or indeed culture, mythology?
Yeah.
Every shot is loaded with meaning.
I guarantee you could go out there right now and take and literally parodies or homages.
Yeah.
You could literally go out there and find from TV, any TV theatre, film, you name it. You could literally go out now and remake Star Wars just using different elements of different films.
Yeah.
And you could make Star Wars because everything has been done.
Yeah, of course it has. Yeah,
film, but we don't look at it that way.
But I mean, you look at the great horror films that have been spoofed as well. I mean, you get like there was the sort of parrot spoof boom in the early 2000s with Scary Movie, which was obviously parodying Scream. But then, if you go back to the 80s again, we're going back, Marty.
Yeah.
The parody boom starts there with Airplane.
Yeah.
You know, and they sort of repeat these cycles every 20 years or so, I think. And
well, those sort of films, I think that you like you get your Airplane, and you got of course your Mel Brooks films.
Yeah.
And
Spaceballs.
Yeah. I'd see those. Spaceballs came out too late.
It did come out too late.
That came out in '83.
It feels like too much of a pastiche.
Yeah.
You know, instead of Blazing Saddles is perfect because the Western was long gone. You know, it wasn't a thing in the 70s. It wasn't what it was in the 40s and 50s and 60s. So that works. So you've had the whole deconstruction. Same with Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
It's taking the piss out of something that's so well known, you know, that it can't possibly go wrong. Whereas Star Wars wasn't long out when Spaceballs came out.
Yeah.
So if you
it was a dead genre.
Yeah, let's see if taking the piss out of it might revive it, sort of.
I mean, when you watch this Airplane and as I said, Mel Brooks films, that's one of the reasons why I don't like that kind of parody now. Because what's the point of watching something like that when it's been done better?
It's much better. I mean, like you say, Mel Brooks is the man. But I watched Airplane again the other day, and I was struck by how fucking funny it really is, you know, and stuff I didn't pick up before, like paedophile jokes. Peter Graves, like the guy from Mission Impossible is a paedophile. That doesn't even like play ball, and you know Lloyd Bridges and being a glue sniffer. It's just hilarious, and
they couldn't get away with that sort of stuff.
You could not do that now.
You can...
Yeah, you could not do that now. And like you know, I like the coffee black like my men. You'd not get away with that now in any mainstream film. But then, like Scary Movie sort of did that again 20 years later, but it was more sanitized. I like the first two; they're funny.
I can't watch Scary Movie because it came out around about the time Scream, and I didn't know.
Yeah, see, I was always a fan of Scream, but I know a lot of people that weren't and then were later.
First two didn't watch them after the first two.
Fourth one's actually good if you give the fourth one a chance. It's not as millennial as it seems, you know. But I think you can't mention the 80s in horror without mentioning Wes Craven. I think
Wes Craven, Cabal
revolutionised the whole thing, didn't he? Really.
You're right. What's it called? One that this because 1986, Deadly Friend, Wes Craven movie.
Oh, okay, I've never seen that.
After his friend is killed by an abusive father, the new kid on town attempts to save her by implanting a robotic microchip into her brain. This is the sort of thing, because I was an Elm Street fan in the 80s, and then I'd watch anything, I'd try and watch stuff that Wes Craven did, and you'd see the poster, I see if I can pull it up on IMDb, you'd see things, that's the video, go on IMDb, you'd see something like that, sorry, we're looking at the original theatrical poster for Deadly Friend, Wes Craven 1986, that's the sort of thing you'd see on a video.
And it would get your imagination going, wouldn't it? Like, what's going on in that film? I didn't know Cassidy Swanson was in that.
Yeah. I can't remember if she gets a Hoo Hoo's How reference
Possibly,
to
maybe.
Dude, Where's My Car? And that's... and you'd watch something like that's got a really gruesome scene in it, and it's stuff like that, again, appealing to the younger market.
Yeah, the good thing about Craven is that he's an educated director. He was a
teacher.
He was a teacher, yeah. So I think a lot of his films go deep with how disturbing they can be. I mean, Hills Have Eyes, the fear of the out. I mean, he basically said that was a western. You know, the camping van is the wagon, and the mutants are like the Indians. I mean, that's a little like troubled interpretation now, but and then with things like The People Under the Stairs, where he goes into.
I saw that
that's
one.
That's a great film. That is absolutely fantastic.
That's about 91, wasn't it?
But but that, I mean, the levels of the house are supposed to be like the representations of your psyche. And then with Nightmare on Elm Street, I mean, how scary is it that someone can get you in your dreams?
Yeah.
You know, that revolutionises the whole slasher, doesn't it? Because Freddy can do anything when you're asleep.
And he can turn you down when you die in your dreams, you die in real life.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Which is a well-known fact.
Yeah, that was but it was brilliant. It was.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was actually based on a real incident where a couple of Filipino lads actually died in a dream and died in real life. But I think there's an actual condition now about it's called Sleep. I can't remember what it's called now, but he said he based it on a real incident. So yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street is based on a real incident. Chew that one.
I got a bit of a thing with this. I went and saw Elm Street 4 on the big screen. You know, that was like 88.
4.
88 was Elm Street 4.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant the first one. Yeah, it was. Yeah, my year of birth.
I was watching on the big screen at the time when I was definitely
that's
May
Rennie Harlin's
89.
first film, wasn't it? Oh, that was definitely
May 89.
That was 21 days before I was born.
May 89.
Yeah, that's Rennie Harlin's first film, wasn't it? First American film.
I saw that because it came out in 89, but it came out in America in 88 because we got it about a year. August 88, we got it about a year afterwards. That's unusual. That's unheard of now.
Yeah, 5th of May 1989.
Yeah, I saw that in 89. And I remember sitting in the cinema and actually watching because it was the first 18 I ever saw on the big screen, and it was like.
It is quite a good one, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, that to me is you got the big hair, you've got let's kill off the entire survivors in the first.
Yeah, I kind of like that whole Dream Warriors storyline that they brought.
That was freaky. The bit where again Wes Craven, the bit where the
I still can't. I still don't like that scene.
I don't like the bit where she slashes her wrist at the start. That freaks me out.
Yeah, I don't like slashing wrists.
Me neither.
But I mean, Elm Street's another thing that's experimented. You know, Elm Street 2 is like the gay one. Everyone remembers it as the gay one, don't they? But it's actually a really clever film.
And he did the director of 3 did The Mask, and Eraser, and The Scorpion King.
I think one of those are good.
With Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Yeah. But yeah, and I remember that Elm Street 3 and 4 were to me are up here 80s films.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
They are.
I'd push it to 5 as well, probably.
5?
Although it's not technically 80s, but it feels like the sort of tail end.
I think it might have been, actually.
Was it not 1990? If 80...
UK. Maybe.
Oh, 89, okay, yeah. So it's the tail end.
It came out in 1990. Let's have a look. This goes to show you nowadays this is unheard of. August 89, and it got released in May 90.
Yeah.
We had to wait, and this was. I remember that one. That was.
Yeah, that's kind of a weaker one though, isn't it? Yeah. Where it was starting to sort of wane. But then you go back to New Nightmare, and then it shows you how much of a genius Wes Craven really is.
Yeah,
you know, doing the meta thing before
brilliant.
Scream. You know, everyone thinks Scream did that first, but it was really New Nightmare was really the one that did that.
94, and it came out in January 95.
I remember that. I remember seeing the posters for that in the video shops and thinking, "Oh my god, that looks terrifying."
I thought that was it. January 95. I couldn't have seen that at uni. Before I saw it at uni, I'm sure that. I know there was one. Let's have a look. There was one that came out that was ID for it. It was a 15. I'm gonna.
Judge Dredd.
No, it was a horror.
That is a horror. Fucking horrific.
That is. I'm gonna have to go back and find out what was released in around October 95. It was a horror though, and I got ID for it, and it just amused me.
Yeah, but I mean, anyway, like I think the thing with Craven is that plays on like the fears that are already there underneath, but like because we're all scared to go to sleep in case we have a nightmare. You know, what if your nightmares could kill you?
Especially it's
how scary is
horror.
That? Yeah. I mean, the remake is terrible, just because of how.
I want to just
doing the first one again. I mean, do something original.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'd have made the same mistakes they made, turning him more into a child molester than a killer.
Yeah, see, that was unnecessary because we knew that was an undertone that was already there. They just didn't explicitly say. You know, we knew he's a child murderer 100%.
Yeah.
It's like the whole thing in episode 3. You didn't need to know that Darth Vader killed kids.
No.
Like, it just cheapens things.
I didn't.
You don't need to have things explained to you all the time. The greatest horror films are not explained.
Yeah. I think today, with the whole child aspect and with the way it's all becoming more prominent and with pedos and murderers, I think that as a character, that's going to be anytime you do a remake, you can't turn him humorous anymore because of that whole.
No, because I mean, like you always like to keep Freddy on the comedy back burner, don't you? Because I mean, when you consider the first one, I mean, it wasn't really that funny. He was he was scary, but then I think it was around 2 or 3 was when he started making the quips and they kept them in.
I think if you go in terms of horror 1, 2, and New Nightmare, but you miss out all the other ones, then you've got a truly terrifying character. But as we were saying with the 80s progressed, it's sort of like made the appeal to children, and it's it was diluted for cash.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing that I wanted to touch on, we haven't touched on yet, and this is the studio killer, is that in the 80s with horror, whereas you'd have your Elm Street money, this was paralleling with the Jason films, you have your first few that made you money. By the time you get to your fourth one with with Jason, they decided that's it, we're going to end it with 4, then ended because they were diminishing returns.
Yeah.
They said 4 made the money, so they said, we're going to reboot it, we're going to keep going again. And up until Jason Goes to Hell, anytime you had a bad Friday the 13th, they'd bang it straight out with a new one just so they could make the money back. Now, with Elm Street, 5 wasn't as big as 4, so they went and got Freddy's Dead, put Freddy's Dead out. That was a success, so they managed to get Wes Craven back for New Nightmare. Now, as soon as you make your first one hit, you make your second one makes more money, your third one you makes no money, they just kill the franchise.
Yeah.
And that's what the thing with the 80s is. Studios had more money.
Yeah.
And they would literally go out, instead of stalling a franchise,
they would take the risk.
They'd take the risk and do another one just to recoup and keep the franchise alive. Now, the way things have gone without the video market and with illegal downloading and everything, and streaming services, we're just stalling it now.
Yeah,
and I think that's a killer for the.
I mean, like, video really helped a lot of films have a second life. You know, like we said earlier, Blade Runner and The Thing, they relied solely on their video releases to get that cult following going. You know, and you can't really do that anymore. I mean, there's a couple of, I can think of one film that did really well on Blu-ray but not in cinema, and that's Dredd.
Yeah.
And I am glad at that, the fact that happened, but it can't happen that much anymore, because once it's gone from cinema, it's like the studios just want to say, you know, I'll get rid of that, next one's this, you know, sort of, and it is sad. It is sad.
I said that a lot of, you look at something like Modern Day Annihilation. Boom, Netflix, that's horror, that's scary.
Yeah.
And that goes straight to Netflix.
Yeah. I mean,
because they just don't want to put the money to invest in it.
It's just, but even big directors are doing it now, like
Scorsese,
Coen and Coen Brothers and Scorsese. Like, why? I mean, it's just strange, isn't it?
Easier money.
It is easier
to be a bigger market.
But I mean, I agree with people like Christopher Nolan who say I won't ever have any of them on Netflix because I like cinema as an art form. So I'm going to give you. And Spielberg, yeah. I mean, I don't like all of Nolan's films, but I respect him as a filmmaker. You know, he always produces cinematic, big budget, you know, films that make you feel like you're in the cinema, and he experiments with things like IMAX, doesn't he? I mean, Dunkirk was perfect.
I could hate
the perfect cinematic experience in the last 10 years.
Yeah, oh, brilliant. And we're gonna have to do this soon. If you want to get the cinema experience, invest in a cheap projector.
Yeah. Or if you've got 40 grand, you can actually get a cinema fitted in your house.
That's also a way of doing it. But yeah, when we watched the likes of Ready Player One.
Yeah.
And watching that in the cinema, wow.
Yeah. Then I never got to see that in the cinema.
Oh,
so.
I did it twice because I loved it so much. I think it's go veering off, but it's and this is a game of horror. And with 80s horrors, I'm glad I've been able to say I see some of these horrors, the 80s on the tail end of the cinema.
Yeah, I'm well jealous.
So it's, and I just think the way, again, going back to the whole way things have gone now is, I really, I don't like the way things have gone now. I like the old, and doing this podcast has really brought back a lot of memories.
That's why if you ever get the chance, any of you, if you see a classic, I don't like saying the word old, a classic horror film or any film pop up in your cinema, go see it. Get the experience of the original. I mean, I'm so happy I've seen my favourite horror film in cinema, Dawn of the Dead. It's just so different to seeing it on your home screen. It's sublime, and you shouldn't pass it up. Is all I'm saying.
Alright, see, for me, like I said, I'm not really a horror fan.
Yeah.
But I saw Nightmare 4 on a big screen. To me, that was big.
Yeah,
for me.
I've seen Nightmare 1 on big screen.
Oh, lucky! I'd love to see
that. The year after our cinema did The Lost Boys.
Oh.
That was great, you know. And I've seen Halloween as well. They played it before they played the new one.
Nice.
So that was a good experience as well, because it was sort of like a direct lead-in.
Can I classify it as horror Alien?
Oh yeah, of course.
I saw Alien this year, 45th
Alien's great in cinema.
That blew me. Completely blew me away.
I mean, there's still like a bucket list of things I want to see, but I'm glad I've seen the films I have in cinema, because it must have been amazing just seeing them when they were new.
It was. The ones I've seen, I'm so glad that I've been people are going at my age, and I'm proud to say that I'm old enough to remember the mid-80s.
Yeah.
And
I was born at the end of the 80s, so I can't.
Miss
the 90s is what I grew up with, sadly.
But I miss, and this is the thing that we're going through all this stuff. The thing that I truly, this podcast has really brought back a lot of memories for me, and it's made me realise how much I miss going to the old cinema, but there was only two screens. How much that I like. It's not really bad. I like old. There's a cinema in Northampton, Cineworld. Before they did it up, because it opened mid '90s.
Oh yeah.
And then at one point it was really run down. Then now it became more and more run down when the likes of View. Then now it's all been done up. And I used
saw
to like
Predator at that cinema.
Predator.
Yeah, the first one.
Oh, lucky.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago in November. I think it was the anniversary. But I remember that cinema for a while as well, actually.
I saw Pulp Fiction at then, and I mean I'm lucky I've seen it multiple times, and I saw Pulp Fiction in the original. Happy anniversary for as I remember we were recording yesterday was the 25th anniversary of the release of Pulp Fiction, but I loved looking at the film posters in the cinemas. I loved the fact that, like I've said before, that it was so much. The horror seemed brighter.
Yeah. That was a future.
Better.
Yeah.
And now everything just it
looks the same.
Yeah, it's not. I've got an idea for another podcast, which I'm going to be saying after we finish things. So it's going to be another podcast coming soon, but it's going to be slightly different. I'm going to be saving this until when we're discussing afterwards. Expect something really, really cool coming from us soon.
Suspense is killing me.
It's going to be. I'll tell you afterwards. But I want this to leave this as a little thing for just between myself and Callum. But I've got a little thing we're going to be doing soon as a podcast. It's going to be so unique, and it's going to be a short one. I think it's going to be a 20-minute one.
Okay.
But stay tuned to this one if you like us talking about cinema and you love this sort of thing, going down memory lane. We're going to be doing something very soon that is going to be completely unique in terms of podcasting.
I think I know what it is actually. But
so, you know what? I was going to ramp my end up by just saying, you know what, I thoroughly enjoyed this. This has been, considering I don't do horror.
Yeah, no. But I think 80s horror is different from any other era of horror, isn't it? Because it's the enjoyable era of horror. And
I'd like to thank Callum for suggesting this today. This has been it's been very cathartic for me to go down this memory lane and just going back to discussing something that was so cool that
influential as well. Yeah, I mean, the 80s is instrumental in horror being what it is today, I think.
I've got nothing more to say on this subject.
Yeah, there is no more to say. The 80s rocked. Especially horror-wise.
I'd like to thank Callum for coming up with this one, and I'd like to thank you listeners for indulging us in this.
Yeah, definitely.
That's me, I'm Stevie W.
See you later, guys.